Hello and welcome to episode number 7 of Import Tutorial. I am of course Steve McVicker, also known as Neo Dragon, and this episode we're titled Sound and Input. So we're going to learn how to preload a sound effect, play a sound effect, and we're also going to learn a bit about CCButton, which is a CCNode and it's a button class, and we're also going to look at kind of just general touching the screen, so touch input, mouse input. So let's just get straight into this. Before we get into this episode though, I want you to create a sound effect for when our button is pressed. I'm going to show you how to do that now using a website called bfxr.net. So this is bfxr.net. It runs right within your browser, and this is the tool I've used to make pretty much about 80% of all sound effects within SoundForms. So what it is it's a kind of synthesizer and mixer, and it exports a .wav file, a .wav file, or a .wave file. To use it, you can use the pre-made selections here on the left hand side, so you can make a sound effect for pick up an item or pick up a coin effect. So all I'm doing is just clicking this button here. There's the kind of laser shoot effect, there's an explosion, power up, a hit or kind of hurt or a damage sound, a jump effect, and again you can see it's changing the sound effect. All I'm doing is tapping the button here and it's randomizing the sound. Of course, there's a blip or select, for example, when you're using something in the menu, and then you can completely get a randomized sound. And if you hit mutation, it will take the sound you already have and mutate it slightly. Now, of course, you can mutate it yourself. The sounds here, and you can also change the type of sound effect or the wave. That's a bit of a bad example. Let's change that to, let's say, okay, something like that. So it's the same sound effect, it's just changing the type of kind of wave kind of sound output it's making. So what I want you to do here is just make a sound effect for when a button is pressed. So most likely use the blip select. And once you've done that, all you do is just export the wave file to your desktop or export to a folder. Name it something like capital SE for sound effect underscore and like, I don't know, menu select or button press or whatever. And once you've saved that, then just drag it into your project folder, into the resource folder, just like you normally would with any other image or any other resource. Make sure you've selected all your 3 targets, and then come back into the project. Right, so back in the project here, I've already got my sound effect brought in. It's called se_button pressed.wav. So let's just go straight into our project and I'll show you how to do that. So what you want to do here is, underneath, go up to the top of your class of your scene, and underneath where we have user interaction enabled, that's important because we'll be using that later on. Make sure we have our work out the logic. We're going to load in our sound effect. So I'm going to create a void or a method, excuse me. We can do this like we'll say preload one like that and say sound effects. And this is important because if you do not preload in your sound effects, you'll get a bit of lag each time a sound is first pressed, and that makes for a really bad user experience. It can actually completely delay up the response of your user interface until the sound is played as well, so you do not want that at all. So to preload sound effect, we're using the Open Audio Engine. It's a free class by Apple itself here. So to declare, all we have to do is just do it's already there, OAL simple audio. Do a shared instance. So this is referencing the class. It is a singleton class. I'll explain that later on in another episode because we're going to be creating our own global variables ourselves. This is a singleton class, which means there's only one instance of it, and this is going to handle all of our kind of sound effects. So once you do that, we're going to call the method preload effect. We're passing in a string, and all we're doing is passing in the file name of our sound effect. So mine is se_button pressed.wav. Now what we'll do, so the sound effect is loaded, so I'll show you how to play the sound effect. So we'll just create a new sound effect and we'll say play sound effect, and the exact same again, call our simple audio engine, which is shared instance, and we'll say play effect, and you literally just pass in the string again for the sound effect. So I'm just going to copy and paste. Right, so what I was saying originally was, before I kind of got distracted there, is in your init method, make sure you preload your sound effects. So all you just do is self, call it like this as well, much easier than calling the perform selector way, and say preload. So of course we're calling the method. So remember that if we use the perform selector, this will be called after all this is done, whereas if we call it like this way, just kind of the object name which is self and then the method, it'll be called instantly the moment this line is kind of ran. It will call that method. So now that it's called, let's do we'll just do test sound effect. Of course, it's always good to comment your code. Use our keyboard kind of shortcut, our code snippet shortcut of perform selector, and we're going to call our play sound effect method, and we'll just give it a slight delay of 3 seconds. So let's build and run our project. I am running the Mac target, and we should hear, I didn't have my earphones in there, so I'm not too sure if it played. I'm pretty sure it did though. Let's just go again. And there you go. So that is our sound effect being played after 3 seconds. So that's the sound effect we're going to use just for our button press right now. So that's very simple of that's literally how you call a sound effect. So I'm going to just remove this. So let's say when a button is pressed, you can literally just copy and paste in this line. So when you do a button press, you play that sound effect, and that'll be the sound effect that's played when your button is kind of pressed. Okay, so I hope that made a bit of sense here. That's a bit rambling, but let's get into this. I already have a pre-made button here, so we're going to go straight into the CCButton class. Now I do have 2 images, and the 2 images here are button 01 and button 02. So kind of one's being used for when it's normal, and one is kind of the press state. Now I've already had it pre-made just because it does take a bit of time, but I'm going to explain it here. So first of all, I'm just going to go down here and I'll divide this out as well. So I've declared the button as a CC button. When I've done that, then you kind of pull up this method. So let's say if I'll just create it again here, we'll just say I have it as button run because I've taken in, I originally was going to have a kind of a sprite run across the screen basically, but you can call it whatever you want. So I just have btn, so button underscore, and I had a run. So let's say if I create my own button here, we'll say button equals CC button. Now you'll get a few things here. You'll get a few different options. So you can say button with title, so which literally is just text. You can specify the font size and the font name and stuff like that as well. We can also use our a sprite frame. I'll explain sprite frames in another episode, but I'll show you in above. And you can also just there as like this is the method we're actually using above there as well. So the last method is the one I want you to select, and I want you to pause the video and copy what I have here. So when you say button title, just put in nil. For our sprite frame, you want to make sure we have this code here. So do a square bracket and use CC sprite frame, frame with image named, and the name of your button file. Okay, so that's very important because it's basically the exact same as just using a CC sprite, but we're specifying just kind of a frame for it. So it's the exact, nearly the exact same way of declaring a CC sprite, but it's just a CC sprite frame, which is a subclass of it, and it's frame with image named, and make sure it's the name of your button. The highlighted sprite, so this is basically, that's a default here, this one here, so sprite frame, this first one will be the default, what the button looks like. Highlighted sprite frame is when you touch the sprite. So when you interact with the sprite, when you're holding your kind of your input, so your touch or your mouse click on the actual button, that's what it will look like. So which we have is button 2. And the disabled frame we don't need to worry about too much right now, but we just put in nil. Okay, so our next is of course we just position. We're gonna add the button. By the way, this is done in our draw startup scene. So of course wherever you have your background, so wherever you drew your background, put this button class in as well. So obviously I'm leaving off after the last episode, which is where we've also drawn the car onto the background. I've removed the actions, so we're not doing any of the actions that we had in the last episode, and I've just added in the button here. So the button has been created. We then position the button, so it's going to be positioned in the center screen and about 78 pixels. I'm actually going to change this here, and I'm going to put it up to be about, let's say 300, which means it'll be up near the top of the screen. Remember 480 by 300 is the design size, and our y-axis goes from the bottom of the screen to the top. And then we've added it to the background itself, so background add child button. So what's really important next is you need to specify a target for the button itself. So I've kind of just made a bit of kind of white space in between here. So normally this can be up here. We've added to the background. This here, the toggle state is when a button is pressed, you can have it as a toggle button. So for example, in ZenForms, when on the D-pad, the run button as well, which is funny enough named the run button here. If you for the D-pad, when you press the button, you want it to be kind of, it's a toggle button, so basically when you press the button, your character is then running, but you leave it on. So then if you leave it as a toggle switch, so I have it just commented out here, but if you have button run and you just do dot toggle select state, and that's a boolean, so or bool, so yes or no. If you say yes, when you press the button, it will stay in its sprite frame 2, or the kind of highlight frame, which is the button 2. And then when you press it again, it will go back to the other frame, so basically like a toggle switch. But we're just going to comment that out, we don't need that right now. But this line is very, very important, this next line. And you can add this line after you've added it to the scene. So you need to specify what the button does when it's pressed. So you say button run, or the name of your variable, set target, so just say self, which is we'll call this class the testing class. So we'll call the class its name basically. So set self, and you say selector at selector and put the name of your method. So for example, if we wanted to draw under a car, we'd have draw car. I've set up our own new class here for just called car move, which is this what it's calling here. And all I've done is just move the action that I've created in last week's episode. I've just moved it in to its own method. That's all I've done. I've literally just copied and pasted the code, and I've just created it as the car move. So when we build and run this, what should happen is we'll have our button displayed up near the top, which it is. I'm going to move it down in a minute, but when you press the button, it'll run the method. As you can see, the car moves. So another cool thing we'll do is we'll just move it down a bit more. It's a bit too high up, so we'll just say 200. If we give it a title, we can actually pass it a string, so we can say press. So if we build that again, I'm building it on the Mac target, but it doesn't matter too much as well. There it is. There you can see. Press the button, and you can see if I'm going to hold my mouse button down here, but you can see as I press over, you can see that's the button 2 state there. So it's button 1, button 2. And a really interesting thing as well you can do is you can say press to move the car, and what will happen is the button will actually stretch out to fill the rest of the text. Now of course you do get the it's pretty much right on the edge as well there, but you get the idea. You can see like the labels is right at the edge. You can just change your button and make that look a bit more fancier as well if you want, but you can see it is really handy that you can just have one resource, which if we go into resource file here, is this kind of small button, and it gets stretched out based on the size of the text. So let's say move, I want to say press. We'll move it back up to, we'll say 280, so it's nice and high up there. And then what we'll do is we'll play the sound effect. So all we do is, where did I put that code for the sound effect here? Literally just copy and paste that in. So we'll say play sound effect for button pressed, and then you can say do the action. Am I spelling that right there? There we go. Right, so if we play that again, press the button, you get the sound effect. There's no lag as well. So if I remove the preload effect, so just comment it out, there may be a slight lag. So let's see. There you go. So it was very, very quick. It's only about a second. And again, it depends on the machine. But if you're running this, let's say on an iPhone 4, it would lag for about 2-3 seconds nearly, just while it preloads that sound effect. So it's just really, really important. Or we'll try to play the sound effect. So it's really important to just preload it and make sure you call that within your init method. So remember, that's the code that runs when you start up your scene. Very important. Run it here. So you can just say work with your logic and say preload any sound effects, and you put all your sound effects you want to preload. Any sound effects you use in this class, put it in here. Now let's get on to so we have our button press and the car's moved, but let's just show you something else here actually as well. So when you press the button, what happens if you press like 20 times here? Yeah, that's not good, is it? You don't want that to happen at all. You want the button to be pressed once, does the action. When the action's finished, you can press the button. So what we'll do here is go up to our class here, our header file, excuse me, and just put in a boolean. Now, normally we do this in a global variable class, which I'm going to go into later episodes, so I'm just going to declare here for now. So we'll say bool, and we'll say disable button presses. And that's it. So I don't know where we're getting that warning there, but anyway, give it a second to compile. So when the button is pressed, what I want you to do, so here's where the button's pressed, I want you to add in button press, say button press is equal yes. Above that line, I want you to add in a comment and say check if button is already pressed. So do if disable button presses equals yes. So that's a comparison. So if it's equals, it's a comparison, not a setter. So if it's equal to yes, press in return and the semicolon here, or the terminator as I call it. So what's going to happen here is if the button is set to yes, it won't call this. It'll basically return, which means it won't call any code. So this is really, really important, and this is a really handy tip here. So if you ever want to check for something, so let's say you want to check if something is equal to a value, and then if it's not, run this code, you can just do it this way as well. So let's say you could always have like if my int or whatever you want to call it is equal to 5, let's say I want it to be equal to 6 to run this code, say just return out. So basically what's going to happen here is when this method is called, it will check if the button press is equal to yes, and if it is, it will just disable it. If it's not, it will run the code. So what happens here is it's going to disable button press equal yes. So if I press it, or play button here, and I'll just press it, you see it's running across. If I press it again, now here's what's happened here is the button is still pressed as yes. So to remedy that, we will create a new method. So I have a lot of testing here, as I was testing out shaders here. So we'll just do a new method, and we'll just call it allow button presses. And all we do is disable button presses, so we get our boolean, which is a class. Remember, we can access that anywhere because it's in our header file for our class, and we just set it to no. And what happens then is, so we'll do after the action. So you're gonna have to do this every time you call an action. So this is really handy, and I use it throughout my code everywhere as well. So when a button is pressed, basically this is to stop the user being able to glitch and like really like double tapping your button, or kind of maybe trying to do some trick to break your code. So you enable the button presses, or disable the button presses, set it to yes, and then after your action is complete, you call the selector. So allow buttons to be pressed, and we'll just say perform selector, put in our allow buttons to be pressed, and make sure you call it after, so for delay after our action's done. So we'll say action jar, we'll put in our action jar. So you can set that to wherever, you can set it to 2 seconds or whatever. So now if we play it, I'm going to try break our game by pressing it tons of times to see nothing's happening. Now the action's been done, we can press it again. Of course the car doesn't flip because it's already flipped in the last action. But again, if I just keep tapping, you'll see it won't glitch, and it'll just play again, just like normal. So that's really, really important, and I hope you understand that. If you don't, be sure to ask me in the thread. So what's happening here is, remember, we have a new variable. All it is just a boolean for disable button presses. We check and see if it's being pressed. If not, we'll return out, or if it is, we'll return out, which means we won't call it, we won't do the rest of this code. If it isn't being pressed, we then set it to being pressed. We set our button to be then, our stand effect to be played. We do our action for the button, and then once everything is complete, so again, remember, you can apply this to any part of your code. Once whatever you want the button to do is then completed, just then call the button to be allowed, or allow button presses, and make sure you set up this method for allow buttons to be pressed, and just disable the boolean, and that's very simple. So now we've learned how to play sound effect. We've learned how to use the CCButton class, and again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. We're going to look at actually touching the screen. So we've already got our kind of touch method here, and it's used in our sprite draggable, which is a sprite class we create. So this is where things kind of get complicated, because we have 3 targets here. So if you go up to your project, you click on this kind of middle icon here. We've got 3 targets, so 3 apps basically, 3 different apps. We've got the Android, we've got the iOS, and we've got the Mac. Now of course, there's no mouse on the iOS build. There's no touch input on a Mac. So we have to have code that handles that individually. So we have methods here for touch began, touch moved, and touch ended for our touchscreen devices. So our iOS and our Android. Now I'll explain that in a second. Then we've also got our Mac code. So our Mac code, we've got mouse down, mouse dragged, and the mouse up and as well. And then these aren't ever really used in Cocos2D. I do have them in there, but I believe Cocos2D can't actually handle them. But we have mouse down enter to mouse down exit and up inside. I don't quite know what that means. I think it's when you're inside the actual sprite itself and you're clicking down. I'm not too sure, but I do have them in there just in case. Like it is like kind of like an Apple kind of suggested code, but we're not going to be using it. Now, this is our sprite draggable class. This is our real class we have. So when we create our sprite draggable, basically, when we have a touch began, we don't do anything. When our touch ended, we don't do anything. But when we move our touch, so remember when we have our sprite draggable on screen, and we touch our sprite draggable and we move it, our sprite moves along with it as well. So our code here is basically, it gets our position of our touch, and then it just positions self. Our self is then referencing the sprite draggable, which is the class, like the actual the node itself, and it's just updating the position. So that's how it works. So it's the exact same code you see here. Then again, for the touch moved, I have basically for the equivalent of the Mac, which is the mouse dragged, which is the equivalent of touch moved. And it's the exact same code again, it just gets the class. Now what's really interesting as well, you can see the class isn't highlighted, the syntax isn't highlighted, where it's highlighted here for the, you can see, tell by the different colouring of the text. So that's because we have our Mac target selected. If we just selected the iOS target here, we'll say for iOS, or we'll build it for the iPhone 6 simulator. Now you can see it's highlighted here as well, and it's disabled kind of here. And the reason for that is, you've got this really weird if statement. And it's not like any other if statement, but this will be our if statement we'll use for, it's basically a macro. It's built into Cocos2D. I believe it's built into originally like Sprite Builder, because that's what's cross-platforming our game. And it's this kind of weird macro here for it checks if it's on the platform iOS or if it's on Android. So let's just kind of go into that real quick. I'll go in. So we're building for the iPhone 6 now. We're building on iOS. I'm going to just have it for the iPhone 6. I want you to copy and paste all of our touch right up to the if. So right up to the if here for iOS and Android. And just copy all of that. Copy it into our test class. So go back into our scene, or testing, excuse me. Select somewhere down. Let's say I'll draw it above my shaders here. Put it in here. Now, do a hashtag end if, right? So we're basically ending this weird statement here. So this code will only run if it's on iOS or Android. If I try to build this for Mac, this would not run at all. There would be no input. So let's just do something here. What we'll do is comment this out. Actually, I'm going to remove this line here. Change this from self.parent to just self. Remove the dot as well. And I want you to nslog. NSString. nslog. And we'll say touch x equals, and we'll say percentage %f because we're going to log out a float, and we'll say touch y equals the %f, and then come over to the end of our string here. Remember, we're going to pass in parameters, so we're going to pass in the pause, which is a cg point dot x, and our pause dot y. So if I build this, we should get no errors. Now, here's something actually really interesting here, because if we actually just build this and play it, and we run it, it should run. I don't know where our iOS simulator is. Here we go, just took a second. There's nothing being logged out. Now, this is actually my mistake. We need to go into our header file for our scene, and where we have our see the way test scene, and basically what's happening here, it's test scene is what? So it's basically a subclass. I think I've explained that before. Change CCNode to CC scene because it's not taking in our input, which it will now. Make sure in our init file we also have self.user interaction enabled. Now I'm not going to push that into the main repository of the Git repo. Just good to know that now we can just rename it to CC scene rather than a CC node itself. And now we should be getting the touch events, because that basically what happens is when we tell it to, in the init method, we tell it to look out for user interaction enabled. It will constantly check to see if we're actually interacting with the screen. So if we're just going to go back in here, if we look at our log file, so make sure you have the middle panel up here. Look at our log file, you can actually see our touch input is being moved. So look, as I move around, it's logging out our X and Y value within the screen. And that's great as well if you want to learn to position something. This is really, really handy for when you're designing. So let's say you go, okay, let's say we're setting the anchor point of the car to 0, 0, and we're like, where is that in our screen? We can move and touch our screen here. And we can go right there, it's 42 and 52. And you just put that in as the, like CC, like, you know, when you're positioning the sprite. So like our position, CCP, and literally all you do is, like say for example here for the button. So let's say we wanted to move the button up in the background. We want it to be about, let's say a bit higher. We put up here, so we'll say 305. 305. Build that. And there you go, it's up a bit higher. Remember, the anchor point is in the center of the button, I believe, as well. Yes, the anchor point would be about here. And there you go, you get the idea, it's moved up. Now, so that's touch input. We just literally have it though for iOS. So if you want to do it for Mac, we can literally just go into our CC sprite draggable, and what we can do is just copy and paste this code in. So literally, I'm going to put this in here, kind of ignore this, never used. Okay, so we're going to mouse down, which is the exact same as touch began, mouse dragged, the exact same as touch moved, and then touch ended, which is the exact same as mouse up. So basically, mouse down means you've clicked, mouse up means you've released your click. So if you want to do this for Mac, all you do is just copy and paste this, remove the else if. So I'm just going to show you, copy it into our scene. Underneath our end if, for our, remember this code will only run if it's on our iOS target or our Android target. And actually, I'll just show you, for example, if we build it for Mac, this code won't run at all. So this code will not run at all. Build it for Mac, there's no touch input. Look, there's no output. So now we'll add it in. We'll do our hashtag end if, and just remove this weird else if here. So just literally if on Mac. And what we can do is copy and paste our code as well. Remove this part and just paste it over. So remember, we're building for the Mac target. I'm selecting my Mac. Build and run. Oh, we're getting an error. Oh, It's not touch, sorry, excuse me, it's event, right? So event. So that's the difference here as well. So CCTouch is a Cocos2D method to handle touch input, and that's the name of the variable. So you can see touch. So I never really explained that. So you can see touch, and then it does a kind of cool bit of code of converting the node. That's a really cool Cocos2D method to work out where you're touching in relative to the screen position. So all we're doing is just changing it, and instead of CCTouch, it's just an NS event, which is a default kind of event listener for Apple. And there you can see it's logging out. If you look at the log down here at the bottom, it's logging out our touch input. And of course, though, it's gone relative based on the screen size. So you can see that it's a much higher value as well. It's actually not relative to the background, but relative to the scene. And I believe our Mac window is 960 by 640 or something like that. If we go up to the top here, we can actually see it. And you get the idea of it there. So that's it here. So what we can also do as well. So let's go in our touch began. We'll go back to build it for our Android or iOS target again. We'll say iPhone 6. We can just put in an NS log. And we will say touch start, copy and paste that, and just say in our touch ended. So keep an eye on our log again. I'm going to build it again. I might give it a second just while it builds the simulator. So touch start, I'm holding my finger on the actual Mac trackpad, let go, touch ended, and then touch, then we can drag, touch ended. So if you look at the thing, so basically any code you want when you touch the screen, put it in here. Any code you want to happen when you kind of drag your touch, put it in here. And same again for the touch ended. And to save time for saves time for when you're on the kind of Mac target as well, and you don't want to constantly copy and paste every code. Like what if you had really complex code for detecting the touch here, like something really complex in your touch? You can actually just call another method. So you can say, you can create a method to say do something when I touch the screen. So let's say do void, do something when I touch the screen, and I just do self, do something when I touch the screen, and copy and paste that into both where your touch began is and touch our mouse down is. And then any code edits you make, you just do it to your actual method as well. Pick up a coin effect. So that's gonna be it for this episode. So all I'm doing again, I always say for your homework, I try to have something wrote down that I want you to fill. This episode again, there's an explosion. I want you to load in your own sound power. I want you to mess in. I want you to load in your own hit or kind of hurt or damage sound. I can't really tell. Jump effect. Unless you make a video, you'll have to record your. And again, you can see it's changing things. Like all I'm doing is just tapping the button here, and it's randomizing the sound. Of course, there's a blip or select, for example, when you're using something in the menu, and then you can completely randomize sound. And if you hit mutation, it will take the sound you already have and mutate it slightly. Now, of course, you can mutate it yourself. The here, and you can also change the type of sound effect or the wave. That's a bit of a bad example. Let's change that to, let's say, okay, something like that. So it's the same sound effect, just changing the type of kind of wave kind of sound output it's making. So what I want you to do here is just make a sound effect for when a button is pressed. So most likely use the blip select. And once you've done that, all you do is just export the wave file to your desktop or export to a folder. Name it something like capital SE for sound effect underscore and like, I don't know, menu select or button press or whatever. And once you've saved that, then just drag it into your project folder, into the resource folder, just like you normally would with any other image or any other resource. Make sure you've selected all your 3 targets, and then come back into the project.